After studying this module, you shall be able to know the facts about the turnaround of East Asian economy and the emergence of four Asian tigers, get an idea about the still ongoing debate over the factors that led to such miraculous growth of four tigers, identify the factors responsible for spectacular growth using the concept of growth accounting, and evaluate the various policy measures and interventions related to macroeconomic stability, educational attainment, and manufactured export.
Remarkable record of exceptionally high and sustained economic growth. They grew faster than most of the developed countries of the world. The four economies in the East Asia registered a phenomenal growth during this period. This included Hong Kong, Korea, Singapore, and Taiwan, known as the Four Tiger, because of their powerful and intimidating economic performance. The factors that led to such miraculous growth is still a part of the ongoing debate. Economists do exhibit consensus on the fact that the four tigers have registered a miraculous growth during this period, but are broadly divided in their views about the factors responsible for such high growth in these economies. The efforts to resolve this issue is mostly based on the concept of growth accounting. The empirical evidence provided over the years suggests that such extraordinary growth does not depend on the capital accumulation and increased labor participation alone. Consistent technological progress, or the total factor productivity, which is TFP, plays a much larger role than accumulated capital and labor participation. In addition, the policies resulting in macroeconomic stability, attainment of better and quality education, and the promotion of exports also played a significant role in the phenomenal growth of the four Asian tigers.
Let us look at the emergence of Asian tigers, in which we first look at the turnaround of East Asian economies, the four Asian tigers. The economies in East Asia had a remarkable record of high and sustained economic growth during the period of 1960 and 1990. 23 economies of this region registered growth which was faster than those of all other regions. This has been attributed to the miraculous growth in just 8 high-performing Asian economies, which include Japan, Hong Kong, the Republic of Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, and the 3 newly industrializing economies of East Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. The phenomenon has been termed as an Asian miracle. Although Asia has become richer faster than any other region of the world since 1960, growth has not taken place at the same pace across the continent. Growth in the western part of Asia almost followed the growth rate of rest of the world, while the eastern part, which includes the 8 high-performing Asian economies, showed much superior growth rate as compared to the rest of the continent. Even these 8 economies showed variations in their growth. The 4 economies which registered a phenomenal growth during this period were Hong Kong, Korea, Singapore, and Taiwan, known as the Four Tigers, because of their powerful and intimidating economic performance. The Asian tigers successfully justified the title given to them with sustained annual growth rate of output per person well in excess of 6% over the 30-year period. In 1990, The average Korean resident was 638% richer than his parents, while a resident of non-Asian country was richer by just 72%. Evidence of miraculous growth achieved by the four Asian tigers is shown in the table, which provide the ratio of GDP in 1999 to GDP in 1950 of the four tigers and other developed countries in the descending order. These four economies constitute the top four of the list.
Debate over why such spectacular growth. There seems to be broad consensus on the fact that these four tigers have registered phenomenal growth. But there is major disagreement on the reasons that led to such miraculous growth. The nature of the growth has been a widely debated issue. Economists dealing with this issue seem to be divided into two main camps. The first camp is of the accumulationists or the fundamentalists, such as Krugman 1994, who are of the view that the neoclassical process of capital accumulation is the only factor responsible for the East Asian growth. While the second camp is of the assimilationists, which includes studies of Kawai 1994, who claims that total factor productivity did play a significant role in the success of the tigers. They also strongly stress the importance of institutions and favorable government policies in Asia's growth. Such debate raise questions like, do these countries exhibit such miraculous growth as a result of an accumulation of manpower and machinery, or employing the latest technology served as a key to miracle? Is this an outcome of excellent policy formulation and implementation to perfection? How far trade played significant role in their spectacular performances, or was it some other factors responsible for their growth? These are some of the issues that could possibly highlight the factors that led to such fabulous growth of the four tigers. Growth accounting. Most of the arguments put forward to find the factors responsible for the growth of the four tigers revolve around the theoretical notion of growth accounting. The accounting method is based on labor, capital and technology, which contribute to the production of goods and services. Labor refers to the workforce and capital refers to the buildings, machines, vehicles. The capital goods that the workforce uses in manufacturing some product or providing some service. While the methods employed by labor and capital to produce a good refers to the technology. It depends on the development or acquisition of practical skills to get the job done more quickly and more efficiently.
Convergence between the world economies. This would mean that the countries which were relatively poor in 1960 should have higher growth rates in the subsequent decades than those that were initially relatively rich. Figure 2 shows the average annual GDP growth rates of the 82 major countries from 1960 to 1997 as against the per capita output relative to USA in 1960. The hypothesis that the developing economies grow much faster than the developed economies holds true for the four tigers. All four of them had a per capita income less than 20% of USA back in 1960. They performed extremely well thereafter as their average annual growth continued to remain between 5 to 6% up to 1997. It is evident from the figure that the tigers had the highest annual average growth rate than any other country, and it can well be considered as significantly positive outliers. Compared to many other developing economies, the tigers have been remarkably successful in creating and sustaining macroeconomic stability. They have been very successful in the management of three macroeconomic variables: budget deficits, external debt, and exchange rates. These economies were better at keeping deficits within the limits imposed by their ability to finance them without destabilizing the macroeconomy. Korea's budget deficits were below even the OECD average in terms of percentage of GDP. Keeping the deficits within their ability of financing, they were able to avoid the inflation bursts and never had to rely heavily on the inflation tax. Inflation rates of the four tigers and the other countries and regions are given in table. Such low to moderate inflation rates prove beneficial for the business due to consequent stable interest rates. Among the four tigers, except for Korea, no other government has public or publicly guaranteed foreign debt. Singapore, Hong Kong, and Taiwan have not borrowed abroad. Still, Korea was able to maintain a debt to GDP ratio higher than many indebted economies during the period of 1980 to 85. This was mainly due to the favorable feedback from the other policies. The high level of exports, in particular, made foreign exchange readily available to service the foreign debt. The efficient exchange rate management is another major contributor to the phenomenal growth of the tigers. Change in the exchange rate regime from long-term fixed rate regimes to fixed but adjustable rate regimes, with occasional steep devaluations to managed floating rate, proved to be very crucial policy decision in their growth. The combination of moderate inflation and active exchange rate management shielded them from the severe exchange rate appreciation which caused huge damages to Africa and Latin America. This has resulted in unusual stability of real exchange rate.
Let us study about public policy. The debate on the role of accumulation of labor and capital versus total factor productivity on the growth of the tigers is yet to reach any conclusion. Thus, it becomes necessary to look for the other factor which could have been very crucial in such fabulous growth. One such area which is considered to have positive impact on the growth of the tigers is the set of public policies and government interventions. Some of the policies common to all the four tigers that can be arguably considered as the major policies that affected growth includes unusually good and stable macroeconomic management and performance, providing ideal conditions for private investments, increased integrity of the banking system, making it more accessible to non-traditional savers, which increased the levels of financing, increased the levels of financial savings, education policies that focused on primary and secondary education, which generated rapid increases in labor force skills, and agricultural policies which stressed productivity change and did not impose excessive tax on rural economy. They were successful in keeping the price distortions within reasonable bounds and most importantly were open to foreign ideas and technology.
A great emphasis in strengthening their education institutions. Human capital plays a significant role in growth and educational attainment of the working population is an important indicator of the country's human capital stock. The table gives educational attainment in terms of primary and secondary education of the working population in the four tiger nations. During the period of 1966 to 1990, the educational attainment has increased in all the four countries, secondary education in particular. There has been a drastic decrease in the proportion of working people without any formal education. It completely disappears in case of Singapore. This indicates that it was at least partly responsible to the GDP growth. We can see that the broad base of human capital was critically important to the rapid growth in these countries. In these nations, the basic education is highly oriented to the acquisition of general academic skills, while post-secondary education tends to be oriented towards vocational skills. They have also been unusually large-scale importers of educational services, particularly in vocationally and technologically sophisticated disciplines. This gave the firms an advantage of easy upgradation of the skills of their workers and mastering of new technology. The human capital thus accumulated reduced income inequality by increasing the relative abundance of educated workers.
Let us now understand the role of education policy in these four tiger economies. The tigers responded more appropriately to failures in the market for education than other countries. Findings of the study conducted by Pays 1994 suggest that enrollment rates are higher at higher levels of per capita income. But in case of tigers, enrollment rates have tended to be higher than predicted for their level of income. Hong Kong, Korea, Singapore and Taiwan already achieved universal primary education in 1965 itself, well ahead of the other major developing economies. The superiority of secondary education became evident in 1987 with secondary enrollment in Korea moving from 35% to 88%, maintaining its large lead in relative performance. These countries not just focused on enhancement of enrollments, but also took policy decisions to close in gap between male and female enrollment. Higher standard of educational quality expressed
Shows the share of the export by four tigers in the world export and developing economies export. Figures in the table suggest that the total export of the four tigers in the world export increased from 1.5 to 6.7%, and the share in developing economies increased from 6 to 33.9% between 1965 and 1990. The share of export of manufactured goods in the world export increased from 1.5 to 7.9%, and in the developing economies, it registered a phenomenal increase from 13.2% in 1965 to 61.5% in 1990. It is clear from the table that the manufactured exports have provided most of this growth. The link between the TFP growth and exports have been explained by the factors such as improved resource allocation among sectors, economies of scale, and improved capacity utilization. Strong link between the two exists as exports help economies adopt and master international best practice. Firms that export have greater access to best practice technology in imperfect world technology markets. Adoption, adaptation, and mastery of technology is much better in case of high levels of labor force cognitive skills. Without having a highly skilled domestic engineers and workers, it would not have been possible for the tigers to make such efficient use of the foreign knowledge and imported capital. Thus, export together with the human capital accumulation comes out to be the two most important factors responsible for the TFP growth.
Let us now move over our attention to the export policy of these countries. There is a lot of evidence that economies altered their industrial policies in an effort to accelerate their productivity. However, the effect of these policies on growth is still debatable. In the backdrop of these studies, Fisher and Rothenberg in 1994 argued that it is the promotion of exports of the manufactured goods and not the policy for industrial promotion responsible for the extraordinary growth of the four tigers. These countries adopted different export push strategies. Hong Kong and Singapore established free trade regimes, linking their domestic prices to international prices. The export push resulted from limited size of the domestic market along with neutral incentives for producing for the domestic or international market. They provided export credit and had no facility for subsidies. Singapore attracted huge foreign investments in exporting firms. In Korea and Taiwan, incentives between import subsidies and exports were neutral, while in the traded goods sector, export incentives coexisted with substantial protection of the domestic market. Specific efforts were made in Korea, Singapore, and Taiwan to promote exporting industries. Protection to these firms were provided either in the form of compulsion or incentive to export. Firm-specific export targets were employed in Korea. The factor common to all the four tigers was that the government in these countries was committed to promotion of manufactured exports. In this module, we have learned that the four Asian economies, Hong Kong, Korea, Singapore, and Taiwan, registered a phenomenal growth during the period 1960 to 1990. Hong Kong, Korea, Singapore, and Taiwan, known as the Four Tigers because of their powerful and intimidating economic performance. Accumulationists or the fundamentalists believe that the neoclassical process of capital accumulation is the only factor responsible, while assimilationists claim that progress in technology or the total factor productivity did play a significant role in the success of the tigers. Factors responsible for the growth of the four tigers mostly revolve around the theoretical notion of growth accounting. Growth of an economy guided by increasing inputs of labor and capital, termed as extensive growth, is not long lasting. To achieve permanent and sustained growth, an economy must look forward for continuously upgrading and improving its technology, that is total factor productivity, termed as intensive growth. The phenomenal growth of the tigers was mainly due to the increase in capital accumulation, increased labor participation, and most importantly, growth in the TFP. Other factor for their growth is the set of public policies and government interventions, which includes policies related to macroeconomic stability, educational policy, and export policy. Tigers have been remarkably successful in creating and sustaining macroeconomic stability through successful management of three macroeconomic variables: budget deficits, external debt, and exchange rates. In these countries, enrollment rates have tended to be higher than predicted for their level of income. Educational attainment of the working population is an important indicator of a country's human capital stock. That is, educational attainment has increased drastically in all the four countries, secondary education in particular. Policies for promotion of exports of the manufactured goods and not the policy for industrial promotion is responsible for the extraordinary growth of the four tigers.